Hey everybody, it's Teresa from Crafty B. And in this video, we're going to go over the tools that you'll need to have to create your own stained glass. I will be breaking it down into the things you must have, some of the things that it's nice to have, and we'll also break it down by the 4 steps in the construction process. Those 4 steps are designing your pattern in the glass that's going to be used to make your panel or project. The second is cutting. That includes cutting your glass and fitting it together. The third is assembly. Assembly includes foiling each piece and putting those together and soldering them. And then finishing. Finishing is putting whatever you want to frame it in, whether it's a frame, you want to wrap it in some cane, you want to do some decorative soldering, whatever the finishing process for your piece is. And then the waxing and patinaing. So those are the 4 steps: design, cutting, assembly, and finishing. And we'll break down the tools by those steps. All right. Before we break down into individual tools, I'd like to go over a little bit some of the things you'll need for the entire project. First piece is your work surface. You need to have a work surface that's sturdy and heat resistant. I like to have a board. This is a Homosoap board. I have a railing on the outside at a 90-degree angle. So as I'm building my square projects, I can build from the corner out and make sure they're square. It's also soft, so you'll be using push pins when you're doing the assembly. And it's soft enough to be able to push the pins in and hold your pieces in place. So this is a really nice board to have. I've had mine for 10 years. It's just my little workhorse. It looks like heck, but it's all you need. Second, you're going to want some kind of cloth. I like to use these blue shop towels. I get these at the Harbor Freight. It's about $3 for 1 roll. You can use paper towels if you like, or if you have soft cotton cloths, you can use those too, something lint free. You're also going to want to have some alcohol. Alcohol will be used to get the flux and grime off your piece, and it will also remove any pen marks that you have from cutting. And then you may also want to have some acetone, because if you're using a metallic shade of Sharpie, gold or silver, for instance, acetone is really the only way you can get that off. So these 1, 2, 3, 4 things, these are going to be used for your whole project. This board, you can cut on it, you can assemble on it, you can solder on it, you can do all your finishing on it. So this is highly recommended. And as we go through the tools, if you have any questions, make sure you email me at studiocraftyb@gmail.com, or you can post them in the comment section below. Okay, next is design. Design's pretty obvious and easy. You need a pattern, whether you find one and print it out or get it out of a book, or draw your own. You're going to obviously need some paper. Sharpie. Sharpie will be your best friend on any project. A scissor. You may need to cut pieces of your pattern out to put on top of opaque glass that you can't see through. So when doing a pattern, I recommend having at least 2 copies of it, or you can just draw the pieces out as you go. So just some extra paper is nice to have too. You can also use graph paper. You can see I have not used this forever. I don't really ever use it, but graph paper, it has the little squares in it. It's great if you need to enlarge a pattern. For instance, you can do enlarging, and I can show you how to do that. But graph paper, it's helpful. but not necessarily necessity. And then obviously you're going to need some glass. So based upon your pattern, you're going to pick out the colors you want to use and then assemble your glass. So for design, all you really need is your pattern, your glass, a Sharpie, some extra paper, and some scissors. All right, next step is cutting. So next step of the process is to cut each of these pieces of your pattern out in glass. Now there's different kind of glass that we'll go into in the next video. I'm going to show you how to use these tools. But basically glass comes in transparent and opaque and light and dark colors. So your best friend again will become your Sharpie. You can use the black Sharpie on light colored glasses. And the silver or gold Sharpie, you really need to use those for dark color because you'll never see the black ink on a dark piece of glass. You may also need to, if the glass is opaque, you might need to cut one of these pieces out and lay it on top of the glass to cut out. So you also might want to have, not a necessity, but a nice to have, is some temporary spray adhesive. Cut out your piece, spray a little of this, stick it to your glass so it doesn't move around on you when you're trying to cut. Or you can just draw around the paper and cut it that way. All right. A ruler. Ruler, if you're doing a straight cut, you really want to have a nice sturdy ruler. If you can find one that has the cork back, that prevents slippage on the glass. But if you can't find one, what I do is I'll take my ruler, even a plastic ruler is fine, and I'll just put little dots or a stripe of hot glue down. And that way, when you put it on the glass, it won't want to spin around. Next are your cutters. So this is what's called a pistol grip cutter. And you'll see on the very tip, there's a little bitty, I'm not sure if you can see that. There's a little round cutter. Same thing with this kind of cutter. I'm not sure what they call this. I think it's just a cutter. But you'll see there's a little wheel. That's what actually scores the glass. On this type of cutter, you also have a little ball on the end, and that is to tap your glass to get it to run a little bit. But again, I'll show you how to use that next video. But for either kind, whether you've got just the regular glass cutter or this pistol grip, you can see this has a reservoir to put glass oil in. They both need glass cutting oil. So that'll come in a little bottle. And for this type, I just put it in a little glass jar with a piece of paper towel in it, soak the paper towel, and just run my blade in the oil a little bit. So you need a cutter, both kinds, and some oil. Now to make the glass break, to actually break the glass, again, next video, I'll show you how to use these tools. This is a glass breaker and a grozer. So this you'll use to snap off the glass. If you have some bits, you can use the internal little ridges in there to kind of grozer off the glass bits. And this is a running plier. This is the most handy tool ever. So what this does, it looks like it's straight, but there's actually a little bit of bend in it. And what that does is you line up your score with this center cut, squeeze lightly, and this will just torque your glass enough to snap it. It's great for long cutting lines. Now you are working with breaking glass, so you want to have safety glasses. Little bits, little shards will be flying all over the place, I promise you. You want to make sure you don't get those in your eyes. It's one thing to have a cut on your hand, but in your eye, you want to stay away from that. And then this little guy, I find him invaluable. Found him at the dollar store for a whole buck. This board, if you're using this board to cut on, As you cut, it will collect little bits of glass in it, and it's rough, so they tend to stick. So after I'm done cutting or before I cut another piece, I'll just sweep it up, clean it up so I don't get a bunch of little cuts on my hands. So that's pretty much it for the cutting. Fitting, I'm going to show you some other tools here in a moment, but let's just go over these quickly. So you need your cutter with your oil. You need pins to mark on your glass. You need a running plier and breaking pliers to break your glass. Ruler for straight edges and obviously measuring. Safety, you want to have your safety glasses and a little broom, clean it all up. Temporary spray, temporary adhesive if you're going to be cutting on top of the glass. Okay, this is not a necessity. It is a nice to have. This is a light table. This you can place your pattern or a piece of your pattern and glass, transparent or slightly opaque glass. And you'll be able to see the lines of the pattern through the glass on this light table. Next is, this one is a Morton glass cutter, I think they call it, Morton. There's other brands. Morton is the brand. There's others, Beetle Bits, I think is one. But I've had this Morton, oh, here it is, Morton Glassworks. These are great for cutting straight lines. You can also move this. You can also move this and pivot it to make angle cuts. So you can make nice straight angle cuts. It's great for repetitive strips, etc. Okay, this piece of equipment is a necessity. It is a grinder, and this is what will knock the rough edges off your broken glass while you're assembling and fitting your glass pieces. It comes in 3 different size. These are called bits, and you can get different coarseness grades. Eye shield, again, you want to make sure to wear safety glasses while you're doing this because it will fling glass about and you're making some nice glass putty while you're using the grinder. And this guy here, he's kind of a nice to have. I have to say, when I do use him, he's indispensable, really. He gets me through some really hard cuts. This is a continuous ring glass cutter. This is a round bit. I don't know if you can see that. It's round, so you can move it or you can cut in any direction. And it does cut and smooth the edge as you cut it. It can get a little wet and messy, and it's easy to control. But again, he's not a necessity, but he sure is a nice to have. So I showed you the Morton Glassworks to do nice straight cuts. You can also use a ruler for that, but I have to show you this. This is the best tool ever. This, I'm embarrassed to say how much fun I have with this. I want to make everything out of circles. This is a circle cutter. And you can see at the end of this little knob is the glass cutting wheel. And then on this little brass bar, it has measurements. You set the cutter for whatever diameter circle you want. Pop this on the glass, sucks down 6 of the glass, and you just go around like that. It is so much fun. I'm such a glass nerd, but it entertains me so. This is the best thing ever for circles. Okay, so for the extra cutting and fitting tools, we saw the light box. Nice to have, but you don't need to have that. We saw the Morton Glassworks, really nice to have, but you don't need it. The grinder, that is a necessity. You want to make sure that you get a good grinder. It will save so much work. And again, next video, I'll show you how to use these tools. The glass saw, really nice to have, but not a necessity. But I'm going to show you the most important tool supply you're going to need. Are you ready? I swear to God, this is it. Band-Aids. Band-Aids. You will need Band-Aids. Plan on getting some cuts, some pokes, some little splinters, Band-Aids. Not every time. I'm not going to say you're going to walk around with bloody hands all the time, but make sure you have some of these. All right, let's move on to step 3, which is assembling. So while you are fitting your glass, cutting and fitting your glass, you're going to be putting them together. And I didn't mention this in the last step, but as you go along, you're going to be putting your pieces together. You're going to be anchoring them with pins into your board, which will help hold them tightly. When you get your pins, and I learned this the hard way, you can see I have some aluminum pins and I have some plastic, just, bulletin board kind of pins. This plastic top, this is metal top. And make sure you get metal top pins because I have stuck these to my soldering iron. I've burned the heck out of them, and they don't work very well. Plus, your standard bulletin board pins don't have. Let's see if you can see that they don't have a very long pin on them, whereas the metal tip ones designed for stained glass work, they do have a longer pin. So make sure you get pins made for stained glass cold working, not just regular bulletin board. These will work in a pinch. Not saying they wouldn't work, but just be careful with them and you'll probably fight them more than they'll help. So you will be anchoring them with pins. And then I also use tape to tape the pieces together so they don't scoot when I'm trying to fit other pieces. You can use either just regular Scotch tape or masking tape, something that'll release easily from the glass. So that's kind of between its fitting and assembling. So now you have your piece. All glass pieces are cut. They're all fitted together. It looks beautiful. Next thing you're going to do to assemble it is foil. So copper foil is what holds all the pieces together. This is what the solder will stick to. And there's different types of foil. And again, I hate to keep saying this over and over, but in the next video, I'll show you how to use all these tools. Copper comes in different sizes. You can get decorative foils, and they also come in different color backing. There's silver backed. I don't know if you can see that. That's silver backed, black backed, and copper. So as you are doing your design, one of the things you want to make sure, early on is what color you want to patina it. And the color patina makes a difference on what kind of foil you want to use. And they do come in different widths as well. So if you want a wider solder line or a narrower solder line, you can design that as well. Again, we'll go over that in the next video. But it's also really nice to have a holder like this. So I don't know if you can tell, these are just spools. And like spools of thread, they will just unwind and go all over. So it's nice to have a nice organizer like this to keep them in. And as you're foiling, it pulls out, you separate the paper, and it works really handy. And you can have more than one roll in here. Now, once you put the foil on, you need to burnish it down onto the glass. So these are called FIDs or burnishers, FID, F-I-D. You can also use just a stick if you like, something that has a little edge to it, kind of a edge so that you can really get down and burnish that foil on. Oh, don't know if I mentioned it, but these do have a gluey back, so it sticks to the glass. So you want to burnish this so that glue sticks really well to the glass. Actually, my preference is just this flat guy here. He does have some applications. If you're getting into grooves and stuff, you can get into a corner or a nice curve with this guy, but either one will work. Again, that's for a fid or a burnisher. You'll want to have an X-Acto knife. If you mess up on your foiling, when you're foiling, how well you foil depends on how well the solder is going to look. So you want to make sure your foil is even and straight. And if you kind of mess up a little bit, you want an X-Acto knife to kind of trim it up a little bit. And if you make a total mistake, this is great for scraping it off the glass. So an X-Acto knife must have. While we're talking about foiling, I'm going to show you some other little foiling tools there are. I got these. I find hand foiling for me works best. But this is a foiler. You mount the spool of foil on here. You thread it through here. It separates the foil from the paper. And then you just slide the glass through and foil it. Honestly, for me, I didn't find that it was any more even than me just applying it by hand. In fact, I don't want to, this is a great tool, but I never got the hang of it. Let's just say that. You can mount two different foils on there though. So it does come in handy, and this does mount to your board if you like. So it's always there. You just run it through and foil. Then there are these little tools. And this, you'd keep your foil in an organizer like this, thread it through, it separates the paper from the foil, and you just run your glass through. Grab a piece of glass. So you have your foil threaded through here, and you just run your glass through, and you can foil that way. These do work pretty slick. They come in two different sizes for whatever width foil you have. And then I was going to show you this guy again. He is a cutter. So he's a cutter. He's got this little tapper end, but that's what these grooves are for, is to burnish down the foil. So as you're foiling, you just run your glass through. Now this will flatten it. I don't know that it burnishes it really well. Pretty loose. Too tight for that little one. But you can use, if you have a cutter like this, that's what those little notches are for. All right, so that's foiling. Once you have your piece all foiled, you've got it all pinned into place, it's nice and tight. You are going to solder it together. So to do the soldering, the must-haves are obviously solder. There are different types of solder. Most of them have lead and tin in them. In fact, if you look, each one has a number on it. So this is 60% tin, 40% lead. So that means this is a 60-40 spool. If you look at this guy, don't look at my Hobby Lobby price. I caught this at Hobby Lobby the other day. It was on sale. I used a coupon. You can see maybe this is 50-50 solder. So that means 50% lead, 50% tin. So there's different properties to this. And again, next video, I'll show you how to use this and which one you want to use. But soldering, you need the solder. To make the solder stick, you need flux. This is just kind of, if you have anybody in your life that does plumbing or anything, the same kind of premise. Copper pipes, you need flux and solder to put the pipes together. There's liquid flux, and there's also paste flux. I've had this forever. It lasts forever. Application of it, you don't want to put too much, but you want to have enough. Otherwise, your solder will not stick. If you put too much, it'll boil and it'll make weird bumps in your solder. To apply the flux, you need a flux brush. Again, this is just a common flux brush. I like to cut mine off at an angle so that it's a little more pointed and I can kind of get in some of the grooves as I'm putting the flux on. But actually, this is my favorite to apply flux. You find these at any hobby store. It's going to be with the paint brushes. This is a foam brush for like stippling, but it's foam brush. Works on both the paste and the liquid flux. It really gives you a nice even coverage instead of like big glops or lumps that the brush can do. I highly recommend getting some of these extras. You'll probably be using it 1, 2 maybe times. So you probably want to have a little supply. I would consider them disposable. This is almost a must have. It's kind of a nice to have, but I find this indispensable too. This is a hemostat. As you are soldering, this this is metal and it melts and it's extremely hot. So you don't ever want to touch the glass. You don't want to touch the solder. You don't want to touch the heat will conduct down the piece and you will burn your hands, drop it. It'll be a nightmare. So my recommendation is to get a hemostat. You can lock it, hold your piece while you're soldering so that you don't burn your hands. And then there's the soldering iron. This little guy is your friend and your foe. I have one that has the temperature. This is a Hacko, and I like the actual temperatures written on there. Most of them just have notches, and you kind of have to guess what your heat is. What temperature you set your soldering iron at depends on what kind of solder you're doing and what kind of application you're doing. So soldering irons in and of themselves can be frustrating, but obviously a must have. You also want to get a nice solder stand. I like this one. I've broken it, so this wobbles around a little bit. But you can put your hot soldering iron in there. Then you want to have a place to put a sponge. So as you're soldering, you'll have a wet sponge to wipe off. Make sure your soldering iron tip is always tinned. These tend to get dirty depending on your flux and how you're doing with your soldering. These can get really dirty really quick. So I always have an extra sponge. I just cut up a regular household sponge and use it for that. So that is pretty much all you need for assembling. So let's go through them real quick again. Assembling, making sure your pieces are nice and tight. You're going to have tape and pins to anchor them onto your board. Again, this board is heat resistant, so you can just anchor it right onto the board and solder it. Next is you're going to foil each individual piece and assemble them back again. And again, using the pins, you'll anchor them back together nice and tight. Once you have your piece the way you like it, you're going to solder it all together, solder every line. I'm really excited for the next video because I'll show you how to use all these tools. So that is assembling. All right. You did a really beautiful job with your project. Now it's time to finish it. So the last things to do are to patina if you choose. You don't have to patina, and to wax it. So patina colors the solder and the came if you use it. What it does is it oxidizes the tin, I believe. It oxidizes the metal in the solder. So I think there's some other colors too, but I prefer to use either black patina or copper patina. Again, you can leave it just solid, the silver of the solder color if you choose. You're going to apply your patina. I just use shop cloths. Sometimes I'll use a sponge if I have a larger piece. It's liquid, so you just wet the sponge or the cloth and wipe it on the solder and the entire piece. And then you let that dry, wipe it off a little bit, and then you're going to wax it. This is special glass wax, and it shines up the glass beautifully. It protects the patinaed solder because it will continue to oxidize. So I wax the entire piece. Again, we'll go through all of this um, in the next video. I'll show you how to, we're just going to do a primer next time. I'll go through the steps, but we do have an upcoming class that will give you step by step, detail by detail, tips and tricks for each step of the process, how to make sure that you're doing it safely and you come out with a beautiful project the first time. I learned the hard way. I can't tell you how much glass I've wasted and cuts I've had and etc. So if I can teach you my tricks, thumbs up for that. All right. So that's each step, the tools required to do each step. I just wanted to make another couple comments. One, um, I've had questions about how much room does it take to do a stained glass piece. And really, unless you're doing a huge panel, a board this size, I think this is a 16 by 16 inch board. I've been using this table forever. It's a 3 by 6 banquet table. And because each step of the process kind of has its own tools, you can do the designing, for instance, put that away, get out your cutting tools, cut your glass, put that away. Then you can do the assembling, put that away. So you can do pretty much everything just on a surface about this size. The other thing I wanted to do is take a look at how to store your tools. So the easiest way to store your glassworking tools is just a regular old tackle box, toolbox. This was my first one, still kind of grubby. Plenty of room to keep all of your necessities, your solders, your pliers, your towels, maybe even. So a toolbox, tackle box is perfect. Or I want to show you this that my mother-in-law found for me. So I think this is actually a scrapbooking like supply kit thing. This is so awesome. It's on wheels. You can take each bit off. You can get different size containers. You can stack these up if you need more. She found these three. That's all they. I keep showing. You want to see the rest of my glass? Um, that's all that she found. Somebody was giving these away. But this thing is marvelous. I can move this around if I need to carry it somewhere. They all click together, carry it off like a suitcase. It's perfect. I love this thing. So if you can find something like this or you have something like this, I would highly recommend it. Absolutely perfect. So I just want to say thanks to everybody who stopped by and watched this video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments below the video, or you can also email me at Studio Crafty B, just Studio Crafty, Crafty, the letter B, dot, or at gmail.com. And let me know if you have any questions, thoughts. And there is a downloadable version of the supply lists in this blog entry so that you can have your own copy. Feel free to download it and we'll see you next video. Thanks.